Good evening, everyone. Here is Tbilisi Freedom Podcast again, and today we are hosting Mr. Simon Janashia, education expert. Good evening, Mr. Janashia.
Hello.
Could you please tell us more about your background, how it happened that you became an education expert?
Well, I was just telling it before the beginning of the program that I got to be lucky to get to study when I was in high school in US, and there I was lucky to get into a very nice private small school in California, and I found that job of a teacher was a really interesting one, unlike I imagined before. And then once I came back, I wanted always to become a teacher. So I started working at the school when I was still studying at the university here in Tbilisi, and became a teacher, got interested into the field of education. Then I studied education on my master's and also on doctoral levels. And I got involved into a very interesting project of establishing a new school in Tbilisi. That was 23 years ago. So we established that school, and then I get an I had another luck, or maybe it wasn't luck. I don't know. I got interviewed instead of my colleague in a newspaper about education policy issues, and I was very critical. Then the revolution happened in Georgia, and I got invited to work for the government to participate in the education reform. And so that was another experience besides teaching, that I got involved into decision making, planning of curriculum, textbooks, teacher training, all kinds of things. And then after that I went into research, and so now I'm working both on research, and I'm working still at the school that we established together with Mr. Guivi Zaldastanishvili, whose idea that was to bring to Georgia something really special and something really new in education, which is raising kids in a democratic environment, teaching in English, building future not only for those kids but also to help the other teachers and students in other schools. And so I'm involved in that project as well.
I see. So basically you decided to bring American style of education here to Georgia, right?
Well, we invented our own education program, so we designed it from scratch. But yes, we had experience of going to a very special American school, which is Phillips Exeter Academy, which has a very interesting model of teaching. This is around. It is based on discussion-based teaching method. So kids sit. There are 12 kids sitting around the table and discussing interesting ideas and issues every day. So this is like a center of the pedagogy in our school as well. But in terms of what would be the outcomes of the school and how we would organize our education, it is our own design.
All right. Well, we will come back to these methods and style, right? American methods of teaching. But before, I was thinking, to be honest, how to start a podcast. And I think it will be interesting if you answer this question, like, where does the process of education start from? Like, the process of educating a human as a being, because some people believe it starts even before the birth, when you are in the belly. What's your opinion about this?
Well, it depends how we define education. So, according to some definition, education is a process when society tries to design or develop its own future and to transfer its values and not only knowledge but also mostly values, or to say it otherwise, to try to socialize the youth into the society. So obviously, yes, that starts. Socialization doesn't really start before birth. I mean, there is some development, but once a human being is born, then becomes part of the human society, and first from the point of the family, the smallest unit of the society, and then that person gradually gets integrated into different structures, and obviously these are first early childhood development programs, or it could be informal development opportunities that the family provides. And then gradually people get into formal education, and so they go through schools, universities, professional education. And obviously, besides the formal, there's a huge part of education is organized in an informal way. When we as kids play with our peers, or when we interact with the grown-ups, and they also influence our behavior, values. We are influenced by the culture that is around us, so that we know who we are and how we behave, and what is good and what is bad. So education is very complex, but mostly education, unfortunately, is referred to, this term education is referred to mostly to the formal process of upbringing. It is unfortunate maybe because we don't see the value of other ways of being educated, and that brings a whole bunch of not only educational problems but also political problems and societal problems, because we don't value the people who may know a lot but not have huge formal education, so they're then disadvantaged, and their self-image is also quite poor. So just to explain in more concrete terms, you may have you may know people that know a lot of about agriculture, but they may say that they are uneducated, which is I think is wrong. And so people study at the universities to learn the same skills and to gain the similar knowledge that these people have gained informally. But unfortunately, we as a society value more the formal education than the experience or the
and we value
skills.
more when people, a person knows about a specific subject more than he's a generalist, right?
That's another deficiency, yes. So we do not recognize often that someone who is expert into doing something. So, for example, a craftsman, that they are also very educated. So we don't see their education if they haven't gone through formal training. So if they have been going through apprenticeship, for example, that is the society has lost that way of education. Mostly, we still have people. And for example, I've seen many times at the barber shop how parents bring their kids to an expert barber so that they can learn from them, and that is a very important way of becoming educated person as well. But our society doesn't think that barbers are educated people.
I completely agree. Yes, because here in Georgia, maybe in the world as well, but let's take Georgia. The artisan making things with your hands is not considered to be prestige. It is about status when we see some people working on gold, for example, right? Maybe this is all of because those people are not used to work in some luxury offices. Maybe we do not see, right, how they work, but we see the ready-made product, which is on somewhere, I don't know, in the city center, in a nice shop. And what do you think, how can we solve this problem, or how would you describe all of this?
Well, I see a tendency here in Georgia that more and more people are interested in trying out things that they haven't got the education yet. So they're learning by doing. And I see a lot of people around me who have got formal education in one particular domain, but then they're trying to do something else that usually is considered a job of uneducated people. For example, producing, let's say, cheese, or working on the jewelry, or I don't know, building or renovating things for their own fun. And so there's a tendency more and more for the young, as I see also, to try to be independent from the formal office work or the work or being employed by others. So there are more and more freelancers who try to be as independent as possible. There are more and more kids at our school that don't want to study right after finishing school at the universities. They try out different things. They do internships. They just travel sometimes. I think it will come with the transformation of the society as well. Even 50 or 60 years ago, there were important books published that were predicting that we would have more and more free time. I don't know about myself, but this is not really the case. So I'm not a good example of fulfilling that prophecy. But there is an idea that we should be preparing our future generation not for the jobs, but for the free time that they will be getting, because they could be earning their living in less time than we have to at the moment. Especially that is very obvious with the development of technology, that you could do things like in 5 minutes that some people need 5 weeks to accomplish. So more time you have, more you are thinking about
more you explore yourself and your opportunities, right? Yes. And your skills. Yeah. Regarding the system, I just remembered Kim Kiyosaki's speech, her podcast. She was speaking about exactly this thing, that schools, maybe not today, or maybe not private schools, but still in Georgia maybe, the system is trying to kill the creativity in kids, because they're putting them in a box and saying, sit down, do this, not do that, don't do that, don't express your personal ideas and your thoughts, right? Just follow the orders from the teacher. And is it considered to be a challenge in Georgian schools, maybe in public or private, based on your experience?
Well, it is challenge everywhere, not only in Georgian schools, that the structured settings, they limit the ways that you can express your ideas or thoughts or feelings. That is true. But on the other hand, if you look from the other side, if you look at what the schools also teach, they teach also different ways of expressing yourself, which you may not know if you didn't go to school. For example, if you don't learn how to write, for example, you would hardly be expressing yourself in the written form. Or if you didn't learn languages, you may be limited. I mean, we're speaking our second language at the moment, which schools could bring to the people as another platform for creative work. The problem is the system which is teaching kids to comply instead of exploring. And there's a lot of sociological work that studies that the poorer the community is, less creativity is fostered in the kids, because the teachers and also parents, they think that these kids will need to learn how to survive. They need to learn how to become good workers, those who will get a good job, that will outcompete someone who is competing for the same job. Whereas in the more affluent schools, or the parents of the more affluent kids, they may tell the kids, oh, don't worry about getting good grades, just explore yourself, or try out many different things before you find your calling, and so yes, there is a problem, but another important issue is that this problem is also not distributed equally in the education system, and so we may have people who are taught to follow orders more than in other schools. So, and this is there are very subtle differences in how this is achieved. I mean, no one directly tells these kids now, I believe that you are going to be low paid
Sure.
worker, but the way that these kids are taught determines also the way they perceive the world and their opportunities in them. So, for example, at our school, we teach kids to think, so to approach the problem from many different sides, to discuss it, to not to not to be afraid to go against the accepted or dominant explanations of things. So, which in other schools may be more problematic, where teachers may think, okay, now the society expects these kids to be diligent, to be to know the right answers, so that they can then, once the time comes, so that they can really fight for their own success. So the creativity itself is not also the end in itself. This is not the only end. I mean, it is very important for personal growth. But one of the questions that always arises is that, I mean, why would they need to be creative at all? And so that connects to the larger societal values as well. So, what do we want to be? Do we want to be those who are devoting our time for development, or are we the society that try to protect whatever we have at the moment? So more traditional societies, obviously, they may, I mean, it depends. You may have a tradition of creativity in the society and foster that as well. But usually, being focused on the past and being focused on the traditions usually also kills also the creativity as well. So that's another dimension that exists in Georgian society. That is that maybe we in our education system, because the society is also not valuing it as much, are focused mostly on survival as a nation rather than development. And so once you are in that mode that now we have to try not to lose the identities, culture, language, whatever part of the culture, you may also stick to the dominant explanations. So that brings another problems, like, for example, we have experienced at school that we are being told how to interpret things directly. So how to interpret a literary piece, or how do we interpret the history, or how do we interpret the concepts, very difficult concepts, like being patriotic, or
being Georgian.
Being Georgian, which is being patriotic, and
Yes.
yeah, I mean, once you, and it is understandable why that happens as well. And then in such settings, there is not much room for creativity, and then creativity is usually perceived as a domain of arts or crafts, but not of mathematics, or not of history, not of literature, etc.
For example, regarding this, I had a classmate who liked the history and languages, and in every subject he was trying to do the old tasks in Russian. He liked Russian language, and during the history classes, he asked the teacher to do all homework in Russian, just because he liked Russian language. This was a big problem in our school. And the director and teacher and the parents, they met, And finally, they decided to give the opportunity to this kid to do all the homeworks in Russian language. So the history teacher and Russian language teacher could, together correct his homework. And finally, I think he's in Moscow and he's in history. So it worked out, actually. It's all about giving a chance to a kid. This is about creativity, I think. Maybe the problem is, you're right, perceiving creativity to be in arts only. But I think this is also a creative way of learning something.
Well, yes, but then, I mean, the example that you brought, then the question is, I mean, do we really want to raise the citizens of other countries? So the system of education is also aligned towards the national interests. So it's not just individual upbringing of a person, but it is also the citizenship education. So at the moment, I cannot really see how popular, trying to push the Russian culture into the classroom would be in Georgia. So because of the time that we live in, the threats and the politics. But there are a lot of issues of the system that could constrain the creativity. Partially, it's also depending on the context that these kids come from. So, for example, there are families in Georgia that whose mother tongue is not even taught in school, so it is not even used. So, if the kid would want to express themselves or do some work in their own mother tongue, in some settings they wouldn't be even understood. So there wouldn't be even a teacher. In your case, you had in the case of your classmate, there was a teacher who knew the language that this kid wanted to use. But there are whole groups of people in Georgia whose languages are not even considered as being important in the education system.
I see. Yeah, recently we were talking about the opportunities. You mentioned that now there are some tools that you have the homework, maybe things get done in 5 minutes, 4 minutes, right? And I was thinking about ChatGPT and its opportunities, of course, advantages and disadvantages in education system, and what's the end impact of using such kind of tools, because there are issues with plagiarism, for example, that the universities are against of using this kind of tools, but I think the end impact is much bigger. I would like to hear your opinion regarding this.
Well, the short-term impact is that, for example, at our school, it's the daily conversation of teachers what to do now, because it's hard to understand how. I mean, it may not be as big as a problem in the schools where there are very few written assignments, and that is another problem of our education system. That in public schools there are kids that haven't got any written assignment for whole months. At our schools, our kids have several written assignments per week in different subjects. And so now they discovered that they could very easily, they could complete the writing assignments using the technology much quicker. So the teachers are asking if this is going to be developing also, and it is obvious that it's going to develop even to. This is just beginning of technology-aided writing. I mean, we used to use a lot of technology in writing even before, but this is a whole dimension. So we used to use the spell checks and translation tools and so on and so on. But now technology could write basic things sometimes quicker and sometimes better than we are capable of doing ourselves. So, for example, I asked the ChatGPT to write the lesson plans, and it's doing much quicker than I would be able to even think about. Or it could provide you quite decent um, university syllabi for the courses, which has assessment, literature, all kinds of breakdown by weeks, etc., etc., which could be a good starting point, so that you don't have to work on the basics, and you could then extend whatever is suggested by the technologies. But unless you have the knowledge of the domain that you are trying to, in which you are trying to use this tool, you hardly understand whether that suggestion that the computer gives you, or the sometimes people argue that it's not even artificial intelligence yet. So whatever this tool is offering, you have to evaluate critically, because sometimes it gives you wrong answers.
Sure.
So now teachers are starting to think about the importance of teaching these kids not only the subject, but also to teach the subject in connection to critical evaluation of whatever the technologies are offering you in those subjects. That's one thing. The second is we now have to conceptualize what is going to be the world for these young people when they're going to be most active in their lives. So schools, they try to prepare kids for the future in which they would be independent, and where they would be producing, and where they would be acting as citizens, or as professionals, etc. And that world is going to be using this kind of tools. There is no question about it. And it is using already. So maybe in some domains more than in the others. But for example, when you go to a doctor in US, they sit in front of the computer, and then they enter the answers to the questions that they are asking, or in reality the questions that computer is asking, but not directly, but through the doctor. And once they input the answers, there's this program called Watson, and it's called because of the Dr. Watson of Sherlock Holmes. And Dr. Watson, or this program, is then helping to diagnose you. So it gives you it gives the doctor the first suggestions of where to go, with what kind of analysis to do, etc. So now, these kind of suggestions, they are going to be ubiquitous. They are going to be everywhere. Like an architect would be doing, would be asking you questions about what kind of building would you like to have, and then the computer would be generating images from whatever you are telling in just few seconds, not even minutes.
Sure.
Or you could design products much quicker, or you can conceptualize things that you would not be able to, because you may not even have tools. For example, we are at the moment working on some online course for civic education, and we have an illustrator who is drawing things that, when we tried with ChatGPT, is doing it much quicker. Well, obviously, it is still at the beginning stage, and we cannot really explain to that computer what we really want, unlike our illustrator. But in terms of technique, it does simple things very quickly. So people trying to illustrate their books, they don't need to hire illustrator anymore. They could try using computers, and you don't need to know how to draw. Or it does remarkable things. So now the question is going to be, what can we do that we were not able to do without the help of those computers? And then teachers, don't know it yet. There's this funny expression that computers help us to solve the problems that we would never have if we didn't have computers. And yes, some problems are just created by computers that are solved by the computers as well, or by technologies. But we are doing things at the moment that we would not be doing if we didn't have, for example, internet. So, for example, we are communicating with the whole world, and that was not really conceivable before the existence of internet. Even though there were tools like post, or there were the telegrams, and there was television, etc. But we as individuals were not producers of the information that would be consumed by someone in the other end of the world. And it's really hard to understand the future in these terms, but most probably we're going to be augmented by technologies, not just by software, but also by the hardware as well. So I had a very interesting chance in year 2001 to visit a lecture of famous artificial intelligence specialist Ray Kurzweil. And in his lecture, it was an open lecture, he said, okay, I mean, according to the pace that technology is developing, in 10 years there is going to be glasses that is going to be connected to the internet. In 30 years, and so now 7 years from now, you would be able to become connected to the internet as well. So, well, the first part of his prophecy was true. In 10 years exactly, that's when Google, before Sony and then Google produced those internet glasses, which didn't prove to be successful. That's another story. But it is possible to have glasses that are connected to the internet, and there are glasses now that play music, and so they can listen to people can listen to your podcast through glasses now, which was not conceivable. But the opportunities that these machines bring obviously also bring the ethical issues that you mentioned about plagiarism, cheating, or authorship in general. And one of the key tasks of the teachers now become, no matter what subject they teach, is to teach the ethics, which may not be as important in the more simpler settings where kids are producing things while being in the classrooms. Another question that now many teachers have is what kind of tasks should we give so that they can learn interacting with them. So, for example, using ChatGPT successfully requires for you to be able to articulate the prompt. You have to tell the machine in a way so that it also produces the best result that you would like to receive, and that's not an easy task. I've been working with it a lot, and you really have to understand how to interact with the machines now. So that's another skill. So I mean, in school you were not taught how to interact with machines. You're taught how to interact with people and your nation, and then internationally, globally, how to interact. And now you have to learn how to talk to the machines, so that they can talk to you back in the way that you expect. So, I mean, we have maybe tried, some of us have tried to interact with machines with this speech-to-text recognition software, and it doesn't really work because of our accents or the way we. So I often use this voice prompt of Google asking things, and it gives me answers that I don't think they're right. But so it doesn't understand me, and now I have to learn how to speak in the way that my telephone understands me, which is another dimension of the human life. So now you not only become the citizen of the human society, but of the society which is intertwined with the machines.
So you train your voice. Basically, it was some days ago I read the news that because of these voice tools, in banks, I guess, someone could open someone's account because it's recognized the style of speech or something. This is a big challenge, I guess. And
Yeah, that I mean there are many ways that the technologies are going to be developing, and part of it is I mean it's totally different world that we could imagine where um, technologies not only serve you, but you also may become servant of some of those, because I mean they are asking you to do things already. So they may wake you up and they will tell you what to do, and because you program them in a way that they also determine the way you act. And also then that brings another whole a whole array of issues that, for example, if these technologies speak in specific ways which are learned from specific groups of people. So, for example, if we take ChatGPT, it draws upon the on the language and the knowledge produced by some, not all people, but some people that have been acting, producing those knowledge, which is stored digitally. And now when we ask these machines certain things, we are getting the answers that are predetermined by the culture and by the knowledge of those people. And then the question arises: and this may also accelerate diffusion of that culture. Just like when we see kids speaking in or acting in a way that they saw in the videos that they like. So, for example, you see Georgian kids having having not only kids but also adults trying to imitate whatever they see in the popular videos. So, for example, when I was growing up, you would count like this. You would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like by folding your fingers. And now it's by extending your fingers. And how did we get to that? We just saw in the videos that some people in the West, they use this way of counting. So it's not using 2 fingers, but by using gestures that are more American or more European. And so these behaviors. I mean, just recently I was watching a terrifying video of the kids who begin involuntarily imitating people with the Tourette syndrome if they watch a lot TikTok where the influencers are having this syndrome. So they start involuntary movements with their hands. So there are kids who start speaking out things that they didn't intend to, and so on and so on. So that's I mean, it has positive and negative or development, and there are a lot of risks that we have to be mindful about, and so that we can manage.
And you mentioned that now teachers maybe are not afraid, but they're trying to give kids such kind of exercises, so there is less chance to use those tools or copy paste, right? With the question, what's the end effect? I meant this because I think it's my personal opinion, obviously, and based on my experience now, we tend to use ChatGPT too much, and after that, it's getting harder and harder to make a full sentence to write something. For example, this is bad end effect. What's your opinion about this?
Well, there are teachers at our school that use ChatGPT in their assignments as well. So they're not prohibiting students only to use it. They are prohibiting students to pretend that they have written something when the machine has written instead of them. That's true. So, but because they also think that teaching writing is very important, then they also try to force the students so that they try out things to write things which machine could write for you. The question then is obviously, why would they know how to write if in the way that teachers think that they should know, if in the future they will be writing by using technologies. And that's a big discussion. So because I mean, we rarely write when we are alone in the mountains without technologies. Even in the mountains, we have technologies. Even if you are climbing the mountain, I mean, if you look in the backpack of the mountain climber, you would find a lot of technologies there as well. But so the question here becomes what do we really teach and how we teach it. And some teachers, they use this technology to enhance the possibility of teaching more complex things than you would teach. For example, I've seen teachers assign students to use ChatGPT to produce outline of a piece of work, which they would be then working on during the class, or start something during the class, then ask ChatGPT about the advice how to improve it, or have the piece produced by ChatGPT and then ask students to criticize it based on the discussions that happen in the class. But we are talking now about a special school in Georgia, which really has teachers who all of them have computers. They use it on a daily basis. But this is not the case in general. So if you talk to most teachers in Georgia at the moment, the students know about ChatGPT, but they really don't. But teachers have really no experience of using it yet. But it will catch on because, for example, I remember when I used to work for the ministry, there was between 2004 and 2009 when we would ask sometimes the teachers and even school directors to send us emails. They would not only send us the email address but also their passwords. But they quickly learned how to use it. I mean, there is always time when we have no idea how to use it. But the remarkable thing is that now people with very little knowledge can do things that they would not be doing if they didn't have these tools. For example, there are cases that I know that people have written computer programs without knowing how to program using the chatbots. Or there's a kid who wrote the game, produced a game software for playing games using the chatbot without even knowing how to do it. Obviously, I mean, the school is going to be very different, but this is not the first time that there's a major transformation, and sometimes these transformations really change schools, and sometimes they don't. For example, with the development of television, there was an expectation. That was already like 78 years ago that schools would not be needed anymore. So why do you need a teacher if you have a television? And so there were whole fantasies about that technology replacing teachers, etc. But it never did. Even though we can show now a lot of things, but still the education is very similar to what it was pre-television era. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of exploration, so it's not an easy question to
Sure. And regarding homeschooling, what you mentioned, recently I've heard that there are some people in Georgia that are doing this method, right? Why do parents do that? For example, maybe they have discovered from the schools that a kid is behaving differently and which is not correct in the real life, for example, even if the kid is afraid of expressing his personal ideas. Why would some parents do that?
There are various reasons why people do it. I haven't studied what is going on here, although I know some cases as well. But if we take United States as an example, why people resort to homeschooling, there's a large group of parents who do not want their kids to be socialized in the settings that schools provide because of different ideology or different religious beliefs or different culture that they're bearing. So, for example, they may think that kids will be developing values that they don't think are important or that are dangerous for their children. So they want to raise their kids in a more controlled environment, which is home, instead of letting them to go to school. So these are not only religious extremists or like really fundamentalists or these are some. I know, for example, a Georgian whose parents didn't let him study at a school even during the Soviet times because they were they thought that the Soviet school was harmful for people because they were transferring the ideology of the communists and therefore didn't want to send the child to the school. The other tendency that I see here, it may not be even tendency, but I know some cases when children have discovered that there is a more interesting way of learning things than at school. So I know a kid who spends a lot of time watching Khan Academy videos or TED Talks, and they're really bored at school, where they have to wait for someone else to answer the questions of teachers. They know more than school can provide for them. So they're much quicker in learning. They want to learn according to their own pace, and the parents. When they see that their kids are really suffering and bored at school, and sometimes they also have then other problems, psychological problems because of these. They cannot really understand their peers anymore. The school is not equipped so that they can work with these special cases, so that they can accelerate their learning, so that they can accommodate this special need, so to say, of the child, then sometimes parents decide to keep the kid at home. And then the latest development that I see here is also that there are parents now who send their children to the international schools which are taught online. So that's all the new development, and it means that I know about a kid who studies here in Tbilisi. He's physically in Tbilisi but studying in American school online. So that's another challenge for the system, because the system is not sealed anymore and is influenced by these kind of movements, and Georgian decision makers are not really equipped with the knowledge or the will to deal with this kind of issues. So there are also risks that should be addressed. For example, how do you ensure that these people who study in a different system still become your citizens and understand in which country they live, or what are going to be what are the political problems that they would be dealing as citizens, or would they want to contribute to the society that they're living in? Or are they being indoctrinated in those schools? So there's the whole dimension of the children's rights. Are they getting really the education? How does society make sure that their parents are not just teaching them only how to behave, but also teaching them the skills that are going to be important for their well-being after they leave their families and become independent?
Regarding all these things that you've said, I have two questions. I was thinking about that. First is maybe in Georgia we have this, opinion that what's something foreign is always better, and in education we also see this. And the second that you mentioned about the kid who decided to learn online in an American school, In this case, do you think the parents had their role in his choice? Because as a kid, probably he would not be sure to choose these kind of methods, knowing that he is in Georgia, knowing that the future employers may require local diploma or not accept the online diploma. Can you just explain, or what's your opinion about this question?
Definitely, it was parent choice in this case to study abroad and online. There is no problem of getting Georgian diploma still, because you can always go through testing, and then there is this external evaluation possible. So you could, if you are homeschooled, you could go to the state, and then you ask them to give you tests, and then if you pass those tests, you get also Georgian diploma without going to the school in Georgia. But in the case that I'm describing, they don't even care about the Georgian employers, because they know that this kid is going to be, if either self-employed or after leaving the family, or will go to U.S. universities, and then after coming back, I mean, no one is going to ask them, did you finish the Georgian school or not, if they come back at all. So it's just diversity of choices that people have now that haven't existed before, and now people start thinking about how to use these opportunities for their benefits. The system is a little bit rigid. Like yesterday, I was discussing with my students at the university that there was a case of a young person here finishing non-accredited university in Georgia, then going to the accredited university in Europe and finishing masters and then finishing doctoral, and then still Georgian, not finishing doctoral, but finishing masters, and then applied here for doctoral studies, and the person was not accepted because didn't have the bachelor's, which was accredited. I had the same problem, so I had. I have finished my my first degree here in Georgia, and then I have done my master's and doctoral levels in US. And then after I came back and wanted to teach at the university, they said I had to bring all three diplomas. And the first one, the Georgian diploma, I lost it somehow. So they were saying, even though you have master's and you have doctoral diplomas, the paper itself, I still had to show them my lower qualifications so that I would be eligible to teach somewhere where the prerequisite was the highest qualification was doctoral. So it's
maybe it's a distrust towards own system from the government.
People are some mean bureaucracies. People sometimes do not think about the rules that they are making. And this is the case not only here, but also in US. For example, I was applying for my doctoral studies at a very prestigious university in US, and they asked me to bring the certificate for knowledge of English. I said, okay, I would bring it, but I've done my master's in the same university. So how can you ask me to provide the proof of knowing English if I have already proved that I know English in your own university by completing the master's level of study? And the answer was, you are right, but for the international students, we still have to get this certificate. And I was asking, you understand what I'm asking? They said, yeah, you are right, but we don't know how to change it. It's not us who is making decisions. We just have to comply. This is how the bureaucracies work everywhere. And here, I mean, you explain this problem to everyone, and everyone agrees to you. But there is no one who makes decisions. Just to give you an example about the homeschooling problem. So if you are homeschooled, and at some point you want to, let's say you are of the age of the 8th grade, and now you want to go to regular school. So the state tells the kid that you have to pass the examinations for the first 8 years. But the way it is organized is that first you have to pass the mathematics test for first grade, then for the second grade, then for the third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, eighth grade. So if you can pass the eighth grade test, why do you have to be tested on the first grade mathematics test? And they say, oh, well, you have, I don't know, no one knows. And no, there is no one who, and this seems to be a very simple question. So why don't you ask the student to show you the highest prerequisite competency that is required to enter the next grade into a school. I mean, there's a simple thing that should be rewritten in the regulation that exists, but there is no one who would take this job upon themselves to change it. But to anyone that you talk with, they will agree that this is a bizarre rule. But there are probably more important issues that they are concerned with at the moment than changing the lives of the young easier. But then there are real cases. There was a kid who wanted to enter our school, and that kid had to take 50 exams in just 2 weeks' time, so that would be eligible to enter our school, because the kid studies in a school which is not accredited by the state.
Or maybe just he's smart, and regarding this, maybe the government and any education institution, doesn't mean it's public or private, maybe they will design a model to test the kid, is he smart or not, without any examination. I don't know, maybe through a dialogue or something, just to test and see who is he in real life and what can he do. All about being smart, because maybe he is street smart, because last time we had Anastasia Bendukidze, and she was also talking about being street smart and see things in real life.
Well, it's understandable why they have the examinations, because there's room for corruption there as well. So you may just sell diplomas by having conversations with the kids and just claiming that, oh, I discovered that they are smart enough to have a state diploma. And then there are like limitations which limit students to get the diploma if they are not. If they are younger than the school leaving age, etc., which is problematic. I know. Just to give you a contrast between what we're dealing with here and in US. In US, you can enter a university without finishing the school if university decides so. You can even finish. You can even study and finish your university studies even if you are illegal. And here, it's not possible for a university to decide, okay, there is this guy who is ready for the university even without finishing the 12th grade. So why shouldn't they accept it? Because the state says, oh, we're afraid of corruption, and so everyone has to go through the centralized examinations. And so if the university is interested in, let's say, soft skills or the values that these people bring to the university, they cannot consider it. Why? Because we are afraid of corruption. So we are not seeing the opportunity of being free and flexible, and that is a huge problem in Georgia.
And from the point of view of employers, they also require the diploma, and even in big companies like Google, as I know now, they accept students without having the high school diploma, right? Just they're doing some tests. And do you have any statistics maybe regarding the demand of the employers on diplomas? Is it increased or decreased?
I don't have any statistics, but we see that in the vacancies that now it's popping up that you may be asked not a diploma, but as an alternative, the proof of the experience or a product that you have been working on. So in programming, that is more and more the case, that they ask you not what you know, but what have you done, which proves that you would be able to do similar things in the company. But here in Georgia, it's a little bit different problem, because when you have the high unemployment, and if you have few employment opportunities, then it happens often that people send their documents to all vacancies that they see. So what results is that you have, let's say, you announce a job as an employer, and then you receive on one vacancy like hundreds of applications. So I mean, you cannot just go through hundreds of applications just for hiring one person. It's impossible. So you look through the documents, and then the easiest way to filter them, the first filter, is to to see what experience they have and what education they have.
Degrees.
So then that forces also the inflation of degrees. So you may end up having people doing very basic jobs only because they have master's degrees. Or there's a study in Georgia which shows that if you advance into these different levels of education, from bachelor's to master's, from master's to doctoral levels, it doesn't really affect your salary scale. So you will not be offered a higher salary if you have master's than you have a bachelor's. But what it affects is that is your chances to become employed. So higher qualification you had,
still a
higher
key factor.
So in that environment, yes, people are striving for diplomas, and then there are other factors also influencing why people have many masters. So for example, young men here have a lot of masters sometimes just to avoid the army, and so just to avoid going into the military service. So you have people like going into 3-4 master's programs just to be a student, and working in parallel, and then finding jobs, etc. Some people just go into formal education so that they get more chances to become employed even without finishing it. That's why many start their master's studies, but then they get employed into a job that, even if they get their master's degree, would not improve their chances to be promoted, and therefore they just leave the universities in the middle of the program very often. So yeah, education is a complicated.
Yes, no, I see. Because every time there are different questions popping up in my mind, but kind of I cannot collect to ask them all together. But still,
that's when you use ChatGPT. Just ask, well, what kind of questions? Actually, I was, I mean, you are obviously asking interesting questions, but I've been in many TV and radio shows where the journalists have no idea about what to talk about. So I was wondering with this ChatGPT was that, why don't you ask the ChatGPT to give you at least 10 questions so that you could ask? And it gives perfect questions if you identify the topic.
Sure, yeah, I agree. Actually, I did it. I wanted to do it in live, but we thought maybe it takes time or there are some technical problems, so I prepared it before to do an experiment with you, asking what is the definition of being educated and what would be your opinion about this, just a term. And this is ChatGPT's answer. To be educated means to have acquired knowledge, skills, and values through a variety of experiences, including formal education, self-directed learning, and life experiences. Being educated involves not only the acquisition of information, but also the development of critical thinking, like I said, problem solving, and communication skills. Also, the most important, interesting part is in addition to academic knowledge, being educated also involves developing values such as empathy, respect, and socialization, and open-mindedness. Now I can remember you stated all of those things.
Not all
from
of
the
those,
beginning.
but there are some other things that we could say. For example, well, there's this expression in English, the well-rounded person. So the person who not only knows things or has values, but is also is balanced in some way, so that it's not doesn't know only specific things but also general, knows how to behave in different situations. Is yeah, I mean, it's mindful. It's whatever you read as well. So yeah, but being educated also probably means things like being responsible or being being
accountable, maybe.
accountable, non-fearing of certain things, being ready to reject things as well, being assertive, having control over his own or her own actions. But one thing that is not mentioned here is that being educated it also means to know how to learn. That is one of the most important skills. So you would not be considered as having a good education if you do not have so-called metacognitive skills. That is, if you do not know the strategies that you would need to use in order to become more educated in the future.
Sure, and using the information, because when it was my first year at university and during the marketing class, I remember, of course, the teacher, but I will not say his name. And the class was at 9 a.m. And because of his teaching methods, the class was full, at 9 a.m. And he was coming from the gym saying, "Oh my God, you are full again. Why are you coming at 9 a.m.?" And we were just discussing. He said one of the most important things that university will give you is searching for information and using this information. And now I think I understand and I value this. And yeah, it's
metacognitive skills, they're wider than the skills of getting information, because, for example, it could be an observation that you make about the ways you learn effectively. For example, my younger son, he used to lie down on the floor to study when he was young. And this was, and he was conscious about it. So he knew that if he would lie down on the floor, he would do better than if he would be sitting at the table. So if he wanted to study something, that's the strategy he would use. So, for example, if I am cognizant about my routines, and I know that, for example, in the mornings I learn better than in the evenings, then that's what I would do. So yes, searching for and filtering the information is very, very important skill, but you may not be even needing this information at all. So, but you will be learning how to use new materials or technologies, or how to I don't know. Well, I'm pretty sure that for making podcasts, for example, you wouldn't go to have a university degree. I mean, you would be searching internet on like what kind of technologies you would need and how to use it and this and that. And so people learn these kind of things by using the skills that you described. But then there's something else. There's this habits that you have to reflect on, so that you understand what works in your case and what doesn't.
Sure. And probably it's going to be the last discussion, let's say, because as you mentioned, it's very complex thing and it's hard to fit in time. But still, you mentioned being educated to be accountable and have self-responsibility. If we generalize, I know it's going to be hard, but still, are we Georgians, the nation, educated?
Well, it's hard to generalize on the whole nation, but I mean, the way I look at myself is that I had many chances to get the best education, which many haven't had. So every time someone asks me to do something like we're doing now, I see it not just as a pleasurable thing to do, but also as a responsibility, because once you get the good education, you cannot refrain from giving it back. You cannot become selfish. So if you are selfish, then probably you didn't get a good education. That's why you are selfish. People here like to share. I mean, at least around me, like to share their education with others. They find joy when they understand that someone needs their knowledge or their experience. The other thing is, the other question is, are the people curious enough to learn things? Are they searching? And yes, there are a lot of people who are very passive in that regards, who do not who do not um, do not have, sometimes they do not even have the skills to independently learn something, or sometimes they don't have the drive to learn something new. And that, I have a hobby which is windsurfing, and at some point I also tried the kite surfing. And then once I was trying this kite at the Tbilisi Sea, and the guy came and said, "Oh, is this your hobby?" I said, "Yes." And I asked him, "What is your hobby?" And the guy pointed the finger in the space, and I looked in that space, and there were sheep there, and he said, "My hobby is to eat those things." That must be, that's not even a hobby. Why? I mean, so some people find it interesting to be focused on things like eating and drinking too much here, and maybe that's a problem. Or some people, one of the signs that there are not that many people interested, or maybe not that many people able to work on self-development is the amount of the books that are published in Georgia. So I don't know how it is now, but for quite a long time, publishing a book of a Georgian author by 10,000 copies was considered as being a large publication. 10,000 copies for 3.5 million people is very little. That means that there are very, very few readers in reality. Now, in the digital age, I don't know if the same argument would hold, but I'm talking about the time when you had to really buy a book to read it. Well, someone may say, "Oh, it could be because of social problems. People don't have books to read." But then you see that in the alternative domain of, let's say, of restaurant business, you may have much more value that is created than in the publishing businesses. Sometimes I feel that we used to do more interesting things that we are doing now, which more intellectual things that we are doing now. But so then I think maybe I'm acting now as an old person and thinking about the new generations as always. But just to give you an example, I haven't seen for quite a long time a caricature, a drawing, a satirical drawing of some problem. I don't even remember when I saw the last time anything that represents this clever way of showing a problem. In my childhood, there were lots of those, the ridiculing people, government, even the Soviet government, and even the habits that were considered as flawed. Now it's, the only domain is that you may see something produced in that manner is politics. So there's rarely some a satire that you would see about the values that society holds, or the habits, or the things that we do. in our society, and rarely in that form. So that it is the image, producing the image is also very. I don't know. There was this long tradition, starting from the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century in Georgia, of having this caricatures of political or social events.
Issues. Maybe now those are presented by through graffitis on the walls.
But there are even very few artists, graffiti artists. So there's this
paint meaningful
that you could recognize, and then has also the message conveying through the image, not just by words or not just by text, but I don't know where these kind of things went, but sometimes even I don't know. So it's maybe I mean we'll find it again sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And to be honest, I didn't know about this, and I will look for it for sure. And maybe to finish on a great note, and maybe you advise some good books to our kids, students, and or just give an advice in how to learn effectively, or you choose.
Well, that's hard to come up with because the audience is so large. I don't know. I would recommend to the students who are interested in designing or thinking conceptually about education to read works of John Dewey. I think he's one of the one of the key thinkers of 20th century that could help us to understand what is the connection between society and the schooling, and how we can democratize both by working through education. Those who are interested in social issues connected to the education, I would advise reading Paulo Freire, because he has found, I mean, the topic that we started with about the informal education being valued as well is very well explained, why it is problematic in that regards. As of the kids, I don't know, they have to find themselves I don't even know if they would want to read books. I mean, there are quite a lot of interesting videos and interesting. I don't know. What I would advise really is to read the fiction. I mean, I think the fiction is the best education in reality. I mean, if you find what you really like to read for your own pleasure, you're going to learn a lot from that. So whether that is sci-fi or detective or this young adult literature of the fantasy or whatever. I mean, because it gives you. I mean, you don't have to learn mathematics by reading. I mean, you'll be learning that anyways. And then there are other better tools as well, like you have videos and internet explanations, etc. But if you want to learn about the relationships, and if you want to learn about exploration, about adventure, about other worlds, other cultures, you have to read fiction.
Okay.
And I would even advise those who are interested in history to read fiction instead of reading history textbooks. It's much more fun. Obviously, I mean, you could be you could be then believing what is fictional as being real, but still it's much better way to read. For example, it is much more informative to read Orwell to understand what Soviet Union was than to read I don't know, Black Book of Communism or something.
The Farm,
like
you
that.
mean, the Animals Farm?
Both Animal Farm and in
no,
1984.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I will include some friction in my reading list. And I will just ask, do we have some questions from the audience? And yeah, there is.
Yeah, we do have a question. There is a question from Saxon to Simon that what does he perceive to be the role of storytelling in education? That's the one question.
Well, that's a excellent question. We learn a lot from storytelling, obviously, and that's what I was talking about when I was talking about fiction. But if we would like to explore the storytelling as a pedagogical tool, that is very powerful tool as well. Well, unfortunately, because of the history that we had in the education, which was teacher-centered and where teachers used to speak a lot and the children would be just repeating whatever teacher spoke, we somehow get we really dislike teachers speaking about anything. So, and we do not expect them anymore to be good storytellers. We just expect them to be facilitators, as it usually goes. But in reality, those teachers who are good storytellers, they can capture the interest of the children much better than those who are good facilitators. So they can inspire students to do things that they would not do, and they can explain the inner works of human nature, of the natural phenomena, etc., by being the storytellers as well. And then that's one side, and the other is that in the business world, or in the world of the employment, it is well known that the successful leaders of organizations, they are always good storytellers. They can inspire people, and they can always lead people by capturing their attention towards the important things, not just by telling them what is right and wrong, but also providing the personal side of it by telling their personal stories, or telling stories about people that are relevant for the situation. So it's not only important that teachers are good storytellers, but also so that they can also help students to become such. So, for example, I've seen an example in a Georgian school here in Tbilisi. There is this Waldorf school, Waldorf Schola in Tbilisi, where I've seen second graders telling the story of them coming to the school in the morning. So the class was beginning by, it was incredible, a kid telling that I was coming to the school and I saw the drop of the raindrop hanging on the branch, and I looked through that, and then I saw the sun and the rays through that. It was incredible, and then you could see the kids really looking through his eyes into the phenomenon. And then I was really trying to understand how this system worked, and then I looked at the materials of the children, and I found that they had textbooks which were stories told by the upper level kids, And this kind of education is incredible. Yes, it's also it's not only uh, it's not only a good technique, but it's also giving you opportunity to find the personal touch with the people that you are dealing with in the classroom. So you understand who they are and why they are such, and and why they feel the way they feel, and how they why they act in the way they act, etc.
Sure, thank you. Next.
There's also another question. With his experience in Kyrgyzstan, did he observe the cultural education involved in the Epic of Manas?
Oh yes. Manas is very big in Kyrgyzstan, so it's like a Georgian tiger in the panther skin story. So it's a like foundational story, and so you would. I mean, in Kyrgyzstan, Manas is more important even than Night in the tiger skin here. So, for example, you would see the statues of the Manas everywhere. So on the main square. So here we have like Saint George, and there have Manas statue. So yes, it's important. But in general, I think you see a lot of traditions displayed in the Kyrgyz education. And it was very interesting that you would see in different schools different cultural values displayed. For example, there are Russian-speaking schools with Russian as a language of instruction, and there you would see walls decorated with the posters of the war veterans from the Second World War, with this Russian new ribbons, which now are part of the Putin's propaganda of unity of all the former Soviet nations. But in the Kyrgyz schools, you would see totally different images displayed everywhere. You would see images of the traditional way of life, of the elders who have to be respected. So you would see the contrast within the same country as well, of different traditions being valued in different ways.
Yeah, very interesting. We have other questions? No other questions. Maybe we will have more in comments after the podcast. But still, once again, thank you very much, Mr. Janashia. It was very nice to have a conversation with you about education, and I hope it's not our final discussion. We will meet in other podcasts discussing other topics. And just a reminder for our viewers, if you're interested in our topics, you can explore our website, sakartveloinsight.com, and of course our YouTube channel. And thank you once again. Stay tuned for other podcasts. Have a nice day.